The pros and cons of sharing. We all get the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. Pretty good one. Learning new procedures and techniques that grow our skills safely. More eyes on a problem can often supply better solutions. Some of the cons: information being used in inappropriate ways. So I'm sure everyone's seen on the media so many articles come out where a skydiver's parachute didn't open, and that's why there's been an incident. So things can be taken the wrong way, especially online. Fear of getting ourselves and others in trouble with the authorities. That can be a big one. People don't want to say that they've made a mistake because they don't want to get in trouble. Reputations being damaged and the wrong information being shared. Incidents and accidents. The following are some incidents from a range of New Zealand drop zones. And thank you so much, everybody that's contributed to this. I think it's really important and really in line with what I'm trying to communicate, is that if we can share what we're learning, a lot more people are going to learn from these. So from these investigation incidents and accidents, it's not a single person or an event that causes a problem, but more of a series of events that lead to it happening. Some of you may have heard this saying, the Swiss cheese effect. So it's all the holes in the cheese kind of lining up to an incident and accident. And often the series of events start to happen before even boarding the plane. I'd like us to start learning how to look at planning our jumps and spotting the Swiss cheese happening before we have a serious problem. So this first incident, we'll watch the video. All right, so that might have been a bit staggering depending on your internet. But what's happened is this is the end result of a Swiss cheese effect. And you can see here that we've got a reserve PC, a main PC, some reserve bridle, and it's all kind of tangled up on the right-hand side of his reserve, making the reserve act much like it's got tension knots. And where it started, this jacket. So on the top right there, you can see the little red bungee. This camera jacket was used for slow falling with tandem customers that are slow. And that drawstring had been highlighted as a hazard and was normally tied in a tight knot, so it wasn't a loop. The jacket was lent to another jumper who untied the knot to help it fit them. When the owner of the jacket got it back and used it, he didn't check the knot. And when he went to deploy his main parachute, he reached through that loop and pulled the main pilot chute through accidentally. This created a horseshoe malfunction that during the emergency procedures, the reserve pilot chute became entangled with the main that was trailing behind him. The jumper went head down and then smashed his reserve tray with his elbows that eventually got his reserve to come out with enough wind to pull it. The main and reserve both ended up going through that tiny loop. And there you can see the bungee. So lessons that we can learn from this one. Appropriate equipment. If the camera jacket was fit for use in skydiving, this wouldn't have happened. So if it was a purpose-built camera jacket that didn't have hazards in the first place, there's a high chance this wouldn't have happened. Pre-flight, had the jumper checked his gear properly. and knowing that that knot had been undone and redone the knot, is a further chance that this wouldn't have happened. Buddy checks. If he had been going to board the plane and received a buddy check, and someone looked at his pilot chute and then realised there's a giant loop sitting right next to it, they might have been able to point that out. So the theme here is a lot of these are before he even got on the plane. And the other thing I just want to touch on is never give up. This fella here, even though it was going really badly, he went down and fought really hard, which got the reserve out. So he's a very lucky man. He walked away with this with no injuries. Next on the list is Canopy Collisions. And this is one that got brought to me from the summer. What happened, jumper one was in the holding area, starting the right-hand pattern on their downward leg, and jumper two was still doing turns in the holding area, and they didn't see the canopy below them. They collided and they got their foot caught on jumper one canopy, which ripped the canopy, but they could still fly the pattern and flare. The landing was a bit hard, but both jumpers walked away. The investigation and the people involved. It's interesting to note that when asked what happened, both people saw the other one as at fault. When looking at this very serious near miss, the investigation showed that it was inconclusive who was actually at fault. There was no video evidence, or no one actually saw it apart from the two jumpers involved. At the time of the collision, but the Swiss cheese had already started before they got on the plane. Should be noted, both jumpers were low experience and uncurrent or close to it. So lessons we learnt. Jumper two did not receive recurrency training as required by the rules and regulations. Recurrency training and time frames are the minimum rules. Looking at jumper one, having had recurrency training 48 days ago and not having jumped since, it could have been a good idea for them to receive training anyways. A jumper only doing a minimum jumps to remain current perhaps warrants extra attention. Had jumper one and jumper two both been doing recurrency jumps, they're both A license, it's good to know. They would have been on radios and been watched closely by qualified staff, and this likely would have contributed to preventing the incident happening on this particular load, but it may not have prevented it happening on future loads. Some things to ask ourselves: we don't put low experience jumpers in big way jumps, so should we be putting them in large amounts of canopy traffic? Recommend that we have loads with large amounts of low or uncurrent jumpers, that we split the jump runs to give adequate space for jumpers. So something to think about. As a jumper, do you ask yourself if you feel current? Would you reach out to more experienced jumpers to discuss what you can do to get in the sky safely? Do you know the currency rules for your certificate? So it can't just be the drop zones looking out for us. It's got to be ourselves as well. We've got to start taking some ownership, I think, of what we're doing and what our experience is. And if we don't know, then we need to be able to ask for help. And then this is a bit of a near miss. Cool. This one I didn't know what to name, so I called it "What the fuck." Some of you have probably seen this one before. So if it's not clear from the video, what's happened there is that rig has B12 snaps on the leg straps, and during the two-way, the jumper who's filming the video accidentally unclipped one of the leg straps.
Holy schmoly.
Scary stuff, eh? This goes the whole. So what we kind of learned out of this one, the jumper had been using this equipment for quite a while without any problems. Does that make it fine to continue using it? I'll leave you guys to answer that one. The B12 snaps were easily able to be removed and replaced with normal leg straps by a rigger at a really low cost. So paying a little bit more money to have a safer rig was always an option. Multiple other experienced jumpers had seen the gear, jumped with this jumper, but no one had mentioned to her that the buckles is a hazard. And also, it's good to note that the rig didn't fit this jumper very well at all. There's a very small girl and a reasonably large rig, so a bit of a combination between the snaps and the fact that the leg straps didn't go super tight contributed to it. The video went straight online, and the comments made by others really showed how opinions rather than facts can change the lessons learned. And on the other hand, it also reinforces the statement of sharing as a group. We can give more lessons to be learned. So the harness not fitting factor was kind of part of the investigation, was found by people's comments of that video online, to look at that a lot closer. So we can, by sharing, help learn more than just one person's point of view. And what was kind of alarming with this one is it took a very serious incident to highlight how something seemingly obvious is a hazard, and to spend $100 to replace those buckles. So it took until this happened for anyone to really pay attention that it could happen. Again, this could have been picked up on the ground well before that they got on the plane, and the end result happened. Jumper was fine, very shaken, but continues to skydive and didn't get injured. So what we can learn: so many incidents and accidents we are seeing in New Zealand could have been prevented before getting in the plane. So here's a few things that Taupo have given us, what they've done to try and get us thinking a bit more and planning and trying to prevent these things happening before they get in the plane. Types of jumps we're doing and our experience levels is really important. Planning our jumps can help a lot. Loading the plane properly as well. So what do we got? Have you asked yourself, what are the ground winds currently doing? So do we all look at the landing patterns and the winds before we get in the plane? I think Jules might have talked about this stuff already. Where we're exiting. A lot of the videos I got sent, I haven't included everything in this presentation, but a lot were people getting out really, really late on jump run, miles away. They were never going to land on the PLA. So are we all looking before we jump? What is jump run? where we'll be tracking to, so not tracking down jumper in. What's the plan if someone sinks out or cannot be spotted? This is a big one that I see quite often at my drop zones. Is a lot of dive plans are for everything going well, but we should be planning for what happens when they don't go exactly as planned. Exit, break off heights. And are we experienced enough to do the proposed dive plan? That's another one that I see a trend in New Zealand, especially with angle flying, is that we're progressing really quickly without much guidance. So I'm not too sure if everyone knows how to answer that question, if they're experienced enough to do the proposed dive plan. And that's where it's really important that you reach out to someone that is of high experience and ask for their guidance. Until I feel safe and comfortable with others on my jump, it's looking out for each other and looking out for ourselves. I'm sure many of you have been to boogies or events where you get asked to go on a jump, and it just seems like it's a full-on jump that might be way out of your scope, but because of the event, you kind of get sucked into something that you're not completely comfortable with, and sometimes that can lead to quite scary events. Who's around you in the sky on jump run, different groups, gear. It's really important that we've got the right gear for flying the type of jumps we want to do. Cool. Some of the other things you might see, drop zones are using a lot of information around the drop zone to kind of try and educate us on how exit order and separation. And then on the right, there's an example of a manifest sheet. So what Taupo are doing to kind of make sure that you guys are seeking experience is, so on this one, the jumpers have to have it approved. It's signed off by a senior jumper, and all that really means is that you are going to someone with the right experience, a high level experience, and showing them that you've planned the dive and you've kind of covered all those things off that could be a hazard. Drop zone rules and procedures. It's not about making things harder or slowing a skydiver's progression. It's about doing it more safely. I think this is a really important one with people's culture and attitudes, really. In my position, I do get a little bit of grief about making rules, but I think people need to understand why they're there. It is to try and make it safer for all of us. We're not doing it just to make it difficult for everybody or slow people down. And here I've got an example, 80 or near miss. Student with 80 jumps and B certificate, very conscientious student, not an idiot, responsible, safe, competent and considerate, no ego. They were packing the rig and they had just used and were cleared to downsize to a different rig for the next load. Was told by a jump master to pre-flight the new equipment ready for the next load. As per standard operating procedures, they underwent a buddy check by another skydiving student and board the aircraft. Part of the pre-boarding checks is to state that you've had a gear check, know the landing pattern and have checked names and weights, and all this was done. On the way up to altitude, a staff member noted that the AED was not on and that student descended in the aircraft. On the ground, they admitted forgetting the pre-flight, their equipment, and despite getting a buddy check, the person doing the buddy check had missed the AED, and that's complacency. So what I'm trying to get across with this one is that the drop zones are making rules and procedures to look after us, but if we don't follow them, we're still going to have the same incidences and accidents. We're not really learning from mistakes if we're not following new procedures, and that can happen for any number of reasons. Rushing is a pretty good one when the plane's turning and you're getting told to get your gear on straight away quite often leads to mistakes happening. So slow down, keep it safe. And then just wanted to touch on this one and get people thinking about it, how we can share our whoopsies to maximize the pros and mitigate the cons. I don't really have the answer to this, but as a community, I think it's worth thinking about. Getting all the facts shared and what comes out of an investigation, I think, is more important than whose fault it is. It's something I see is people are always trying to blame someone else. But there's, as hopefully I've shown with the investigations, that this Swiss cheese is real, and it starts way before we get in the plane. So it's not about whose fault it is. It's about learning about the Swiss cheese and being able to see, these things happening before we get to the end of the holes. Owning our mistakes. As an operator, I'd respect someone that came to me with their mistakes as opposed to someone that tried to hide it. Not being able to admit when you've done something wrong and learn from it is likely to lead to you doing it again. Drop the ego and be humble. Yeah, I think that's it. Yes.
Awesome.
So, any questions?
I'd like to open just a general comment or question to all of the hive minds that we have on here. So Henry has taken a few incidences to highlight some important things that we thought that skydivers in New Zealand should be aware of. But there's something to take from nearly all of the incidences that happen in New Zealand skydiving, but there isn't a culture of sharing the outcome of investigations. And oftentimes that can be down to liability. People are afraid of liability and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering if anyone has some comments for us about how we can share this information. So Henry has shared some today. How can we do it better and more consistently going forward?
That's a really good question.
It's a really loaded one, and I'd like just people to start thinking about it. And if you have ideas, you don't have to have the answers right now, but I'd like, if people do have ideas, to share them with the Nzpf, and perhaps they might be able to assist the whole of New Zealand in kind of solving, as in my opinion, there's a bit of a problem. We don't share enough.
Yeah,
Henry, thanks for all the stuff that you've shown so far. Does the Nzpf have a system where you know all that information that you have got? Do you have like, is it mandatory to report incidents to the Nzpf or the NZPIA?
Yeah, it is mandatory. Is this what we get given back is a little bit handpicked? We don't get everything, and I think it would be good to kind of eliminate just learning from a few where we could be learning from it all.
Sure. Yeah, as far as the APF, we obviously, all of our incidents are reported, and the more serious ones are sort of dealt with our safety and training team. And we have a monthly email that goes out to all licensed jumpers. And they do the same thing. We can't share all of the incidents, but they and some of them are repeated. So they try and pick the ones that are different and the common ones, and share that to all licensed jumpers. And I think it's great. We get a lot of feedback from members, and it is the most read email out of all of our emails. People want to hear about the bad stuff, because they don't want to repeat it. I think it's really useful information.
I think so too. I think it's and it's a culture that we're trying to encourage here in New Zealand. I think it's worth saying as well that when we share at a national level like that, you know, via the APF or through the NZPIA, it is at a national level, and there's a lot more visibility then to incidences. And even though that's ideal from a learning perspective, it definitely is a barrier to sharing. So, you know, potentially, yes, we need to look at sharing it nationally, but even if there's more of a drive from a Dropzone level to deal with their incident, because then you don't have to put it online, you just get everybody on the packing mat at the end of the day and say, put your phones away, and now we're all going to talk about this. You know, and in fact, when Safety Day started, we were to have this section just for the people who were in attendance, and it changed quite significantly once it was going online, because people are nervous, and that is part of it. You know, people are, it's that reputational damage, and then as a second, the liability and so on and so forth. So I think that we should be looking at sharing it at a national level in the way that the APF does, and the NZPIA already doing it a little bit, but I think we could extend that, but also to encourage drop zones to really come back to incidences that have happened at their particular drop zone and call a meeting, you know, before you even let people starting jumping, you know, that way everybody has to go on the packing mat and listen to this 10 to 15 minutes talk about this particular accident. Because as far as I'm aware, that's not even happening at a drop zone level, and oftentimes accidents at drop zones are to do with that particular environment, you know, whether it's the geographical things that are happening there or the experience level of the people. But like you say, it can be similar accidents occurring again and again. So I'd love to see it happening at a drop zone level, where it doesn't have to have the same exposure and the same nervousness about releasing these kinds of details. And then we will look at trying to do it in a more national way as well.
Yeah, so something else I'd like to just share is, like, so with my experience, I started just at Skydive France, and then in-flight got Skydive Able Tasman as well. And then talking to the staff once I became involved in their operations, they'd had exactly the same stuff happen as us, but they had different solutions in place. And it was really humbling, and I learned a lot just from being put in that position, where I got to learn about another drop zone's approach to the same incidents and accidents. So I think taking that in a bigger picture is what I'm trying to achieve in some way.
Maybe this isn't the best way of doing it, but I understand, obviously, there's a New Zealand Skydive Facebook page. Maybe something along the lines of, that's not just like a New Zealand version of Friday Freakout, but a page set up and monitored quite accurately, where people can give a video or a photo and a full explanation just for sole learning purposes, so that everyone in New Zealand might want to. I understand people are obviously nervous if they do something wrong or something, but just obviously monitor it so that no one's getting ribbed out for doing something stupid. But perhaps
that's a cool idea. So kind of putting the responsibility on the person who was involved in the incident to get permission to share whatever it is that they would like to share, and then to
just for learning purposes in general, so it can just be open to anyone who be like, like with the B12 clips, I also had B12 snaps on my rig, and I got them changed, but I did about 100 jumps on them, and then I saw that video and it scared the shit out of me, and I hired equipment until I got them changed. But if that, and I was searching through YouTube, but if that was things like that for everyone just to be able to get more openly, I don't know if Facebook's the right way of going about it, but it's definitely a platform that could potentially be used. But
yeah, I like your idea.
I think the key point is, that you get the video or something, everyone wants to see the video, but like with the Friday Freakout, you don't get the rest of it.
So maybe because I know you can set certain rules and things, I don't know, but maybe it's mandatory to have the full explanation, almost like the NZPA does give out, but the person that's putting it up is willing to share it with everybody, exactly what's happened and so on and so forth, so that more people can clearly learn.
And you do see this more and more, skydivers taking that initiative themselves and fessing up on their own Facebook page about an accident that happens to them, in the interest of other people learning from it. So maybe providing people with a safe forum and having some instructors on there giving opinions and encouraging healthy discussion, not just, oh my God, that's a crazy video. You know, that way that we actually have instructors on there giving advice about these particular incidences, so that's an extra learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw someone just commented saying it's got to, you know, be monitored, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, obviously anyone who goes onto the page, that's the trouble that you're going to have. There's always going to be one or two people that might want to, you know, say something stupid, but if the rules are set clearly and anyone who doesn't follow them gets biffed out of the group, then hey, then that's the way, but might be a good starting point. I don't know.
I quite like your idea. It's really about setting those criteria, isn't it? So that we don't have people releasing video too early in an investigation, such that it's damaging to people learning from it, you know, that way. So I think as long as we manage that front end of it, I think it could be a very positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have a discussion about it. You know, I think getting operators and sporties together to discuss this is crucial if we're going to change anything.
Yeah,
I agree. I like Sue's idea of the, you know, drop zones doing it, and I understand, you know, running a drop zone is super busy, you know, and drop zone operators and CIs are flat out running the safety already just on a daily day, and I think it's up to, you know, the coaches and the instructors and even experienced jumpers to get this information and share it, like especially on a weather day. You know, quite often the weather's crap, you're sitting around, and it's a perfect opportunity to grab these videos that might have been, you know, posted online with the information, and have that healthy discussion, like you said, Henry, because some people don't learn well by reading or by watching. Like, they need that interaction. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Henry, in preparing the presentation and being here today and being brave enough to share some of your incidences and put that information out there, because that's the biggest barrier, is this fear. But the more we do it, the more it becomes normal to do this, and it should be normal that we share this information, you know, in the correct way. So if anyone has any ideas about how we can improve the sharing of information about incidences in New Zealand, then we're all ears. You can contact Henry directly, or you can contact me at the Nzpf, and we're open to ideas, and it's something that we're going to be actively working on over this next year or two period, to try and bring in a system where we are all learning from our mistakes and each other's mistakes. All righty. Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of Safety Day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to all the presenters. You did an amazing job. I, for one, have learned a heap today, and yeah, I'm really grateful.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for putting this on, Sue.
No problem at all.
Even you know, an idea of just doing this on a regular basis.
Yes, I think so too. You know, cherry picking things and having it on a Friday evening, I think would be great. You know, so I'll try and avoid jumping days again, because it's hard to go and watch a Safety Day presentation when the aircraft is turning. So I was glad there was a bunch of people in lockdown and having bad weather today. So every cloud is a silver lining. But I think, yeah, cherry picking and doing specific things, you know, and maybe having kind of like a once a month Friday evening for Nzpf members to get together and to talk about different things. As today progressed, I thought I'd love to do a session like this about the new crests and coach rating or coach appointments that we're introducing in New Zealand. So that might be the next one on the agenda, where we get together and talk about these new safety things that we're bringing into New Zealand. All right, cool. Have a good rest of day, everybody. Awesome. And hopefully see you in an aircraft sometime soon.
Good. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.